Boom. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko-san. It's good to see you all. Great to see people already commenting, including some great topic suggestions from Dan H, as always, which I always really appreciate, and I will talk about those. I don't have a lot of topics to talk about tonight, although the main ones I think I've highlighted in the title pretty much. Interesting chance this week to talk about Orientalism and appropriation. The word appropriation wasn't actually used, but it's kind of part of that theme of, woke crypto bros discovering words in Japanese that have no meaning, like, like tonkatsu, uh, and finding them. And I joined the having fun around that, even with much pain, created my own list. That was kind of a fun part of Twitter this week, although there are actually there's some legitimate discussion to be had around that, which I thought, which you can't do on Twitter. All you can do on Twitter is throw popcorn and have fun. So I thought I'd talk a little bit more about that this week. Various other bits and pieces. Look, overall, Japan continues to have the highest daily death rates for COVID it's ever had. That said, we're still in the final week of school holidays here, which means that probably rates are going to go down everywhere outside of the main cities and will go up in the cities with people coming back from their vacations. However, that said, the numbers are down quite a bit in Tokyo. They're down to like 14,000 cases a day, which is still like way more than we had in any of the other waves, but it's still much better than we were having, like 30, 40,000 a day until recently. So some good news, of course, with immigration rule changes, which I'll talk about a little bit. Again, if you really want all of the heavy detail on that, you want to talk to Ninja Monkey and so on, or go and check out their videos where they go into all the detail on that. Some hints dropped, by the way, this week that things like easing up and allowing the visa waiver scheme for most countries, like basically being able to travel to Japan like you could before, that looks like returning. So a lot of improvements, but we'll see. Anyway, but it's still been, today is like the first day we've had below 30 degrees Celsius, which again, I don't do Fahrenheit. So, but it was basically the first tolerable day of weather we've had that I can recall in months. It's actually like don't even have the aircon on right now. I might be able to sleep without aircon tonight, which will be the first time in like 2 or 3 months. So, yes, we're exiting the horrible summer that Japan has. Although, I'm sure it's not over yet. I'm sure it's still something left for us. But pretty good. Anyway, let's jump in. I see so many people already saying hello. So let's go in. Dan H, good to see you. Huge squirrel that you've got to let out indeed. Good article in Financial Times, which I can't read if it's paywalled, but I know the subject matter about Abe TCAD, which is the big African aid conference going on at the moment, which is getting a lot of attention on NHK. Japanese investment in African countries, mainly private investment. Investment has fallen since Suga and even Kishida in charge. I wasn't aware of that specifically. It is interesting that there's a lot of noise being made about competition with China for Africa. And actually, I saw a fantastic video on an unpronounceable YouTube channel name, but it's like TKXCat2 or something. And it's basically this person who I think he's British, but he's like based in Belgium or the Netherlands, and he just talks about maps and geography, and like long videos, like 25-minute long rambling videos about like just looking at maps. And he did a good video in the last week talking about population trends, and what's happening in the world with that, and it's pretty eye-opening. If you look at, if there's, if you're not motivated to help developing countries out of altruism, which we should be, we're all people. It's eye-opening when you look at projections for world population in 2050 and towards the end of the century. Right now, something like, there's some sort of crazy stat that I can't remember whether it was 85% of births right now. It's probably not births right now, but it's probably going to be like by the end of the century, 85% of the people on Earth will be in sub-Saharan Africa, i.e. everywhere in Africa below the sort of Tunisia and Algeria and Libya, those countries that are kind of Arabic, Middle Eastern at the top of Africa. Everything below that will be 85% of the global population is about to be African, just based on birth rates. Fertility rates in most parts of the world are like below 2. In Japan and Korea, like getting below even 1. And in Africa, it's like 5 or 6. So there's this idea that there's a scramble for Africa for, helping people out of goodwill. There's investment in Africa out of guilt over colonialism. There's a scramble for Africa out of wanting to take advantage of all the wealth and mineral resources that, rushing to extract them from Africa and to profit from it. But I think if you're thinking like longer term, within, particularly if you're young, if you're like younger than 30, you're going to witness, in the same way that Asia sort of, has become very dominant economically, and how its population has started to, throw around its weight and influence in the world. Africa is going to take that position within your lifetime. It's going to become, right, it's kind of in the same way that countries like Japan and Korea and China dominate, the mindset of security and economics and so on. Africa is about to take that position. And Japan has not been paying much attention. China has been, and people are suspicious of China's motives. I'm already jumping into it, aren't I? I'm going to stop. I will talk about this. People are doing this, they think, to counter China, but I think China is actually kind of smart, that maybe they've just realized where everything's going in the world, and they're just positioning themselves correctly, and Japan's scrambling to do it. And I agree with you, Dan H., that Japan's currently doing a woefully inadequate job of that, but it's something we all need to be aware of, that the world that we're moving into is going to be dominated by many, many African countries, including countries like, in terms of by population, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia until recently, is going to be one of the biggest countries in the world. It's just like, it's going to be like China or India. So just kind of, crazy changes are already starting to happen. So yes, all of that said, Japan has only 8K people in all of Africa versus 1 million Chinese. Japan less than $6 billion investment versus China's 44. And yes, there's this awareness. A lot of, again, media attention being paid to the negative aspects of Chinese people in Africa, putting up racist TikTok videos and so on. But I do think longer term, those people are going to marry, and they're going to form, relationships and ties that Japan just doesn't have with the continent. Not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that Japan probably doesn't have very large deep ties in terms of people with the Middle East, but it has fantastic relations with Middle Eastern countries, including Iran and Saudi Arabia, UAE. So they could maybe still succeed, but I agree that, Japan has just pretty much had, like a lot of countries, has had a big blind spot for Africa. And it's kind of embarrassing. It's getting shown up. And maybe China's got the right message. So Dan H. says, Kishida virtual meeting kept the position of private company investment, puffing up PR in sustainable infrastructure in African countries, and to try to convince them Russia is the enemy. Kishida is a waste of space and should be replaced with a PR leaflet or mascot. It wouldn't be any different. I do agree with that. I've said all along on this show that I think he's just a PR guy in a suit. He's like the antithesis of Suga. It's like they saw Suga and they thought that, Suga, he's so always into policy, and he's like a bureaucrat who became a politician but didn't want to do any of the communication parts of being a politician, which makes you wonder why the hell he wanted to be a politician. So it's like they've replaced him with the exact opposite. He's like the anti-Suga. He's got no policy, he's got no ideas, he's got no substance, but he's good at communicating, relatively speaking. And honestly, I would say if I was handing out like scores for prime ministers, I'd have to think about this. I should do that someday. I should do one of those rankings of Japanese politicians and prime ministers. But I would have Suga actually above. I think Suga was a overly maligned prime minister, and I maligned him myself. I think that you have no right being a prime minister if you actually resent having to explain your policies. But I think he was better than Kishida so far. I'm not impressed at all by Kishida, actually. But yeah, but there again, this deal with Africa that you're talking about predates. I mean, this is this goes all the way back. Japan has never been right on Africa. The fact it's getting worse is embarrassing, but it's never been right. So yeah, that's a great topic, man. I want to come back to that more. But anyway, let's keep going. I'm still going through the greetings, although it's nice to be into the topics early, I guess. We've got Quinn Rankid. Hey, good to see you, Quinn Rankid. We've got Shivers. I'm not afraid anymore because you are here. I hope you're having some of that wonderful Panamanian coffee for breakfast and enjoying the show. Ada Void, good morning. Good to see you, Arizona. We've got Andrea Mulboy late in Australia. Glad that you're up. Thank you for joining. Let's keep going down. Who else has rocked in? More people rocking in now, definitely. We've got Aaron, great to see you, Aaron. Bada boom, indeed. Don't forget the like. Do not forget the like. I do appreciate the likes from everyone. I see we've got a pretty good rate of likes at the moment, but could do it some more. Crypto Airy, good to see you. 85%. Wow. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the world that we're about to be in. So, time to get, time to realize that, people who are getting in early and making good relationships with Africa and African countries and African people are going to be in a good position, just the same as people who got in early with Japan. The people who, founded the first McDonald's restaurants and so on in Japan and, taught Japanese people how to make cars and, all of that, the people who helped Japan develop early did well off it. And, those opportunities are there in Africa right now. And, everyone's ignoring it, right? So, it is a fascinating time. Believe in yourself. Good evening to you. Good to see you. Aaron also saying you won't believe they're going to allow tourists in like before until it freaking happens. Indeed. I also don't buy it. It's weird. In fact, I was actually just before the show, I was just looking at my feeds and I saw that the tourism agency is planning to designate 10 special areas for, for luxury, high premium tourists who spend more than $1 million yen, about $8,000 whenever they travel. And I'm like, what the hell are they? I mean, what are they doing? They sound like they're a Macau casino, operator or something like that. Japan gets most of its goodwill from people who come here who don't spend $8,000. It's the regular Chinese folks who come over here and see that Japanese people are not like the devils from their TV shows. It's the anime fans, it's the backpackers and so on. Those people flood Japan. They have a wonderful time. They go home and they say Japan is awesome, and Japan does well. And Japan wants to celebrate by focusing on areas where people can buy brand goods. It's absurd. But again, it kind of shows me it's weird how Japan just sometimes succeeds in spite of its own best efforts. But yes, that is a thing. Yoni, Butterboom from Tokyo. Good to have you with us. Our man from Finland who was in Tokyo. Good to see you. Yeah, Eric Bailey, I know you're holding back. So, I'm here now, so I can really get started. I was holding back because I was waiting for you. Good to have you in here. BTC Chiba, boom indeed. Good to have you in here. And boom indeed from Milchman too. 10 minutes in, already getting spicy. Yes. Hey, I'm spicy all the time in my own special white bread kind of way. Spicy like white bread. Yeah, we've got Quint Ranked, but unless those African countries become rich as the population goes up, opportunities for infectious disease comes up as well. Doesn't that make the projections questionable? Well, Japan's population went up dramatically at the end. I mean, part of the reason that the populations are going up so crazy is because of the improvements in medical care. Exactly what happened in Japan, exactly what happened, in America and so on. It's also, I think it's not so much, I mean, right now they're drawing, I mean, there's disease and, inadequate medical care and so on and issues with that right now, and those population rates are still going up like that. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a ton more immigration from those countries to other parts of the world, but I think also you're going to start to see, just like, again, you had people taking businesses back, especially when we're dealing in a world where it's really going to come down to creativity and brain power and services and so on, and assuming everything and everyone is going to be connected, which is another theme I'm going to talk about tonight. Yeah, I think that we're going to start buying cars and buying internet services and so on that are going to be based on ideas that come out of Africa, that's what's interesting and good. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Anything could happen with populations, of course. Wars, disease, so on. But those things are happening right now. So yeah. Ebon Legend, good to have you in here. Ebon Legend, waving right back at you. Atomic Tom, PM tier list. Yeah, I should totally do one of those tier lists, shouldn't I, of prime ministers? Since I've been in Japan, there's actually quite a list now at this point. Yeah, and I tell you what, I've had opinions about all of them, and pros and cons. I could say something positive and negative about every single one, even the terrible ones. So yeah, that's actually a really good idea for a show topic. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention, I've been kind of tweeting with Rochelle Kopp. Rochelle's been very active, from Japan Business Time. Rochelle's been very active, literally. She's become quite the activist about a lot of renovation projects, particularly around Tokyo, because that's where she's living at the moment, that involve, redeveloping parks like the Gaien Park area, which was created during the 1964 Olympics, and is the original Olympic stadium. And it's where they actually redid the stadium to do the 2020 Olympics, which were done in 2021. And they're looking now at like redoing the whole park again and cutting down a lot of trees. And she's like, Tokyo doesn't have enough trees as it is. Why are you cutting down more trees? Your plan is stupid. Rise up and oppose. And she's, there's a lot of popular opposition to the lack of consultation by the Tokyo government signing off on the plan, and just opposition to the redevelopment project in general. It's just unnecessary, and the typical kind of corrupt bully through corporate teaming up with construction companies and killing trees and all that sort of stuff. And she's been very passionate about that. It's done online petitions and has actually been quite effective at getting a reconsideration of the project. I have retweeted, I think, when she's put out tweets, asking for people interested to rally together, although I have not myself been as passionate about these sort of topics as her. Just generally, I like new stuff. I'm not a preservationist by nature. I think it's good for new designers and architects to have a chance to build new things, even in places. That's what I like about Tokyo, is that there's always new stuff and old stuff is always getting knocked down. So I'm not as passionate about the subject as she is. She is passionate about it, and we've been tweeting. And there's a suggestion which I like, that we might do a show. I don't know if we can do it on this format. It's kind of hard to bring in to teleconference the way it's all set up at the moment. But we might do a show using something like StreamYard, where we might just talk about this. And given that I'm fairly, honestly speaking, not deep on this, I'm fairly flippant, and I'm fairly open to being persuaded, and I know how persuasive Rochelle is, I feel like approaching this a little bit skeptically. And maybe doing a show with her in the near future, maybe live, with all of you, where we just talk about this and, why should we be preserving old stuff in Tokyo and not, why should we be, and is it, I have questions. I'm all for having more trees. There are whole parts of Tokyo with no trees. So why are we getting wrapped up in, trimming some trees in a park? But that's a flippant view, and that's a view that she very passionately disagrees with. And I think it'd be a good chance for her to explain to this audience. So we'll probably do that later in the week as well. So yeah, lots of stuff going on with that. I don't know why I even started on that, but yes, look out. I could be doing something with Rochelle Cobb very soon. I'll get back to her maybe sometime on a weekend or something like that. We'll be doing that. Continuing on down the comments, where were we at? We've got Quentin Rankid. I always thought China's ambitions in Africa were about minerals and perhaps having seaports. Definitely interested in seaports in places like Sri Lanka, which connect to Africa. I guess, yeah, Djibouti as well. America has control of seaports in Djibouti. So sure. Definitely access to minerals. That's what it's always sort of looked like. And everybody, Europe as well. Belgium had interest in European minerals, and that was like the worst exercise ever. So, who knows what all of their ambitions are, but I do think they probably look at Africa as being the next version of themselves. That, China, high population, rapidly growing population, in complete poverty at the end of World War II, that went through this economic transformation. And I think China sees that, for a country that is not able to continue having infinite economic growth just based on the fact that it stopped its population growing, it could see how it could probably extend its own economic growth through investment in China and, not just extracting minerals, but probably through helping Africa to develop the way that it did. And look, China's got a lot of cred in Africa just by default, and goodwill by default, because it's not one of the Western countries that's just raped that continent. So they're starting from a good position, in spite of the fact that, they don't have, people are saying, oh, they're using debt trap diplomacy. Well, we all know about debt trap diplomacy because that's what France uses. That's what European colonial powers used against Africa. And everyone's saying, oh, don't start doing loans with China because they're going to do to you what we do to you. I understand the perspective of African countries that are like, well, China's got a clean slate. And look, and that said, China's got problems, and I'm not sure that you want to be welcoming the CCP anywhere. But, at the same time, Western countries have a complicated legacy in Africa that makes China appealing, which is why Japan should be rocking in there and, it can be the better version of China, and it's just never been there. So, we'll see. Hey, Theodore Sharp, excellent to see you. Aaron, Swaziland is the epicenter of global HIV/AIDS epidemic with the highest prevalence rate at 26%. Although, now, of course, wonderfully, that the survival rate on that and the treatments coming out for that, it's not, I don't think that that necessarily means anymore that it's not the demographic end that it once represented, right? Of course, Africa has had all sorts of problems with AIDS. In Swaziland, I believe economically is actually starting to do well. I mean, they're starting from a very terrible place, but yeah. So yes, you're right. I mean, of course, it's not, a lot of challenges to sort of come through, but just through the number of people, the number of brains, the number of, just through the human resource alone. Remember, America's rising growth was partly due to its huge population explosion, which was, of course, mainly from immigration, but also from high birth rates. And again, this is just something that Africa's going to do. I mean, you can say in North America, of course, indigenous Americans had huge rates of, disease, were decimated by disease. Same in New Zealand and Australia, of course. Diseases wiped out huge populations there. But in the end of the day, the overall economy growing by so many people is why those countries became so powerful. So still interesting. But yeah, Eswatini, indeed, 30%. That's an incredible rate, Aaron. John Carlo, Illinois, excellent to see you. Good evening. We've got Iraq 299. Good evening, Simon Gang. Yes, cities in Japan love to knock down trees, and those small, tiny parks make way for more parking spaces. That is true. DJ Sunny Side Up, good to see his daughter survived the 10-day-long quarantine. Finally going out tomorrow. Congratulations on that. Aaron, only if Africa can get the massive internal corruption under control, they will be able to succeed. Well, indeed. I mean, like, they have issues, but again, it's all going for them. And again, you've got countries in Asia that have been through this. I mean, Indonesia is another country that's gone through a massive population explosion and is famous for corruption, for example. And even China, it still has governance problems even today, but they still can succeed, even with those problems. We always like to think that when you become democratic, all of these problems will go away, and we've learned that that's not necessarily the case, nor that you have to be democratic to succeed. But yeah, of course, massive issues there, but it's not. The point is, I think all the problems of Africa, which are well known, and the negative associations of Africa, including the famines and the diseases and the corrupt rulers and so on, I think is the reason that everybody just has a blind spot of not believing that anything good can come out of the continent. And again, what you have to realize is they have what the rest of the world is missing, and suddenly realizes that they need people. And it'll be, and look, people could mean wars, it could mean all sorts of trouble. But it also means huge opportunities, and I'm an optimist, so we'll see. But you're right. I mean, a ton of things to figure out. But there again, I mean, the dividend that comes from helping African countries work those problems out, and that's what the TCAD conference that Dan was talking about. This is what international aid. This is where countries like Japan going in and helping those governments set up institutions and investing in setting up institutions and training people, training judges, setting up bureaucrats to be able to run, to set up, road building and infrastructure and so on that they own and that they run competently. That's all investment, which if it works and it pays off, Japan can reap some of the goodwill benefits that come from that, just like it's done with the aid around Asia. So, the point is, it's a mistake to write Africa off. Africa is kind of ignored because it's so associated with all these negative things, whereas, I think we should be probably looking at it in a more, at least for the potential of what it is. And it's always had that potential, of course, but that's about to skyrocket in the same way that no one would have thought China is ever going to become anything in the 1960s, given what was going on there. And it still is kind of a mess, but a lot of people have gotten very rich off believing that China could develop just based on its size and its people and the size of its economy, and that is those have proven to be correct. So yeah. Anyway, Mr. Ort, good to see you. Going good. Saint Sir, good to see you indeed. Theodore Sharp, I've heard that China was buying a lot of land over there. In Japan, is that still happening? Japan's been quietly bringing in moves to try to restrict China doing that. They're worried about China buying like mountains that have water sources underneath them and stuff like that. I haven't heard much about that in the last 10 years or so, but that was a big thing 10 years ago, that there was a bit of concern about that. Dan H. Tanaka is my favorite PM. Whoa, Kakue Tanaka, the granddaddy, because he's the only PM to come from a peasant background and only one arrested for corruption when everyone else was corrupt, if not more corrupt. I mean, Mr. Lockheed scandal. Well, he He just laid bare the system. He was just like, yeah, sure, I take money for policy. Who wouldn't? What do I look like, an idiot? I mean, you talk about, developing countries having corruption issues. Prime Minister Tanaka in the 1970s taking money from developing countries for contracts while Japan was going through its economic miracle. The pinnacle, Japan has come through corruption issues. And there's your example. That said, I don't know an awful well. I know bits and pieces about him. I wouldn't call myself an expert on Kakoi Tanaka, other than, yeah, I mean, I know people who, in spite of knowing his shortcomings, still revere the man because, again, he was so good at money politics, and part of that was not just taking money for the Lockheed, airplane purchases and so on like that, but he was from Niigata, and it was because of him that there's a bullet train to Niigata, and all of the land for the bullet train line was bought from landowners that were basically his political benefactors, and they all got paid off like 10 times the land value paid by taxpayers for it all, and he funneled all that money back into the LDP organization in such a way that 40 years later, LDP cannot lose in Niigata or Nagano or anywhere along that train line that goes out to Niigata. He ran a political machine that, just basically, in a way, you could say it was corrupt, but, it was distributed through the construction contracts and through, through investments in his own hometown area that basically were wealth distribution of a sort. And as you say, Dan H., I mean, he came from a humble background himself, so he wanted to not just, buy votes. He wanted to genuinely enrich his hometown, and he did it, right? So, and people would say he was very effective as a politician for that. He's still famous as being, he probably isn't actually the most corrupt Japanese prime minister ever. As you say, he's the only one who was actually arrested for it, but and maybe that's because of his humble background, but he is certainly known for being a corrupt leader. So yeah, John Carl, Illinois. Am I in Shibuya? I am not in Shibuya. I don't actually. I talk about always previous jobs and previous places I've lived, but not current job or current location where I live. I mean, I live in central Tokyo. I'll say that much. There's 23 wards. I will tell you that Shibuya isn't one of them, and please do not start asking all 23 wards one by one. Might be one of the cities. So there you go. It might not be one of the 23 wards. So yeah. Aaron's been to Africa. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, really hope success for all of them. I mean, there are some great stories coming out of Africa. Rwanda is, Rwanda having a lot of problems still and having had incredible, terrible history. Right now is being considered like the Dubai of Africa, again, with complications. Botswana's, Malawi's got some great stories. It still is amazing to me that Nigeria just can't get it right, given that they have oil and now more people than Japan. Yeah, I really think that, myself included, I have to change mentality about the place. It's just it's a fascinating place. Traveling Gabriel, good to see you, man. I've spent 30 minutes on shoutouts, although lots of interesting squirrels to chase in the shoutouts. The TCAT conference, including, the Prime Minister being lost and clueless in spite of being a recent former foreign minister. And yeah, Japan maybe isn't wealthy enough anymore to actually meaningfully compete with China on numbers. But you know what? If it can't compete with China on like sheer amount of investment, I do think that Japanese people should be able to compete with China on soft diplomacy, on culture, on support for developing democratic institutions. I mean, Japan is a country that was never colonized, and that actually gets it a lot of kudos that it doesn't realize it gets from these countries. The history, the 1919 Japanese proposal to the League of Nations on eradication of racial discrimination. People who know their African history, I've met Ethiopians, for example, who say, yeah, we love Japan. Japan held out from colonialism, and they were the first country to propose racial equality. It's kind of funny. Japanese don't know this history themselves. They don't realize how much they're actually appreciated in Africa. They do nothing to compromise, to capitalize on the goodwill that they should be getting. And how China's getting is just ridiculous. So yes, squirrels all day, every day. That's pretty much what the channel should be renamed. Into the topics. There's not a lot of topics, so I was okay to ramble a bit on that. I will come back to it, by the way. Dan H says, also, if you're telling me that I spend 1 million yen on a business trip with an escort, I wouldn't have to be in one of those guided tours. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I think I mistranslated that for a moment. So yes, coming back, if you spend 1,000,000 yen on a business trip with an escort, uh, I don't understand the full stop, the positioning of the full stop. I wouldn't have to be in one of those guided tours. Well, if you're here on a short-term business trip, you wouldn't have to be here on a tourism visa. But I don't know what they're planning for this whole idea of having this sort of luxury, big spender tourist. I thought you were talking about like a Richard Gere Pretty Woman scenario there. What if someone comes and just spends 1,000,000 yen on prostitutes? Uh, do they get to lose the tour guide? I suspect that's not what they're thinking. But who knows at this point? Honestly, I don't think the policy is very well thought through. Into the stories. First one there, the press conference you can see. I really think this is a massive lost opportunity. So the Prime Minister caught COVID this week. He still isn't very symptomatic. He's working. However, the press conferences are being done by, video conference. And of course, video conferences done the way that they're done everywhere around the world, where of course, the Prime Minister sets up with a Zoom and, a chat and a computer and a camera, just like I'm set up just right now. And all the people who want to interview him, of course, all huddle around a TV screen with a velvet rope in front of it and some bouncer who checks that they're wearing the right shoes and have proper ID. They have all the microphones in front of the TV and they interview the TV like it's a person, just like you do on a normal television. Just like I'm sure all of you are watching the show right now. I'm sure you're all gathered somewhere, probably watching a TV screen of me talking and asking questions one by one to the television. I really think this is such a lost opportunity. Again, I'm showing my age here, but there was a fantastic show in the 1980s and 1990s called Max Headroom, which is about a person who dies in a car accident where the last thing he sees is the Max Headroom sign on a traffic barrier into an underground car park. And he becomes like an AI inside a computer that you can only talk to through a computer screen. It's awesome. I really think they should have done this as Max Headroom. And just had him as an AI talking out of a screen. But yeah, they didn't do that. This is baffling. They're still doing the weekly, the updates, and a big update, of course, with the immigration changes and various other things happening. But this picture is so strange. If they're doing it as a teleconference, why not just do it as a Zoom conference? Why gather everybody? I mean, one of those reporters has COVID, and they've all got COVID from the situation. So yes, it's baffling. Auntie Liana in Yokohama, great to see you. What's the visa for that? Dragon, the Pretty Woman visa. You heard it here first. I don't know if that's a thing, but yes. Bella, think about it. They're hearing that, yeah. But wait a minute, the tour company said I had to use an escort. All sorts of room for hilarious cultural misunderstandings with that rule that I never realized until just now. But I think that this should be the new Max Headroom here. On sad news, the Japanese Sanseido dictionary is removing words from the Japanese dictionary, which I think, even though these are out-of-date terms, which is pretty much my entire New Zealand slang vocabulary is from the 1980s and 1990s now. But they're removing slang terms from that time period. There's another blog here in English which covers more of this, but MD, mini disc. Mini discs I've ranted about a couple of times that they would have been an awesome music format if it weren't for the IP lawyers at Sony that had just acquired a bunch of music companies who said that we don't want it to make perfect digital copies of music. We want it to degrade like a cassette tape every time that you copy music, because otherwise people will be able to, pirate music using MDs. So Sony agreed and deliberately created a great digital copying portable optical disc. I had an MD recorder, an MD player that I used on my DJ sets in New Zealand to record my sets, and it was awesome. But they actually took an extra 6 months of added engineering to make it work worse. So frustrating, but it was an awesome music format, but that's going away. Ringtones, chakumero, are gone, is being deleted from the dictionary. Kogaru, those Japanese women who would get dark fake tans with white lipstick, and I don't know what they were trying to do, but they didn't wash very often apparently, and there was some sort of a trend that I didn't really understood. Most of the girls seem to be coming into Shibuya directly from Gunma and Ibaraki, and Tochi to do that. It never made sense, but it was a thing. Plasma displays. I've got a plasma display. You're taking it out of the dictionary. I still use a plasma TV. It's a Panasonic and it's awesome. 42-inch. It's great for sports. Better than the LED screens. I don't get getting rid of a lot of these. So yeah. Anyway, they're getting rid of a lot of words. So a little bit sad. Pouring one out for that. Thing in here. Yes, remembering the Japanese words deleted from the dictionary by Spoon and Tamago. We've got, yes, that's what Kogyaru were. And you can hear where the word obviously came from. I mean, it was weird. Suchi, that predates me. Telecards. They had telephone cards were a big thing, of course, before mobile phones. When I first came to Japan in 1991, they were a thing. People would collect them. They still exist, but yeah, obviously not used as much anymore. Kogyaru, indeed. MD for mini disc. Oh yeah, there was one in here which they've not included on the list. Boing. The fact that Boing has been deleted, the fact that Boing was ever on the list in the first place, you see down the bottom, Boing means vowel, but that's not what it is in katakana. Boing means like, it's a word for boobs. And old, when I used to work in New Zealand, I remember we'd get these old Osaka and sort of construction worker type guys with the punch perms, and so on. They come up to me and say, I'm looking for a cardigan for my wife. She's got huge boobs. I would say, boy, you got to declare. It's like, man, just casually drop that. I must admit, I haven't heard the word in a while. It feels kind of sad. I mean, there are certain words which you feel like even, they're never really appropriate, but they're never really, someone's always going to use them. It seems weird that they could delete words like that, but that did catch my attention somehow. I guess that's what they're supposed to do. So yeah, the big news about the Boing. I think that's where it comes from. I'm not sure on the origins of words for mammary glands, but yes, apparently Boing. I'm pretty sure it does come from boing. I'm guessing some GIs probably taught Japanese the words when they were trying to express something. But yeah, we no longer have them, so that is a thing. Continuing on, we've got, so the big news this week with the immigration thing. The right way to kind of think about this is they're not getting rid of the PCR requirement for entry. They're instead allowing you to skip the PCR requirement if you've been vaccinated 3 times and you can provide a certain type of certificate that proves that you've been vaccinated 3 times using approved vaccines in Japan. So, the thing about this is, for me going to Singapore next month, woohoo, I've been vaccinated 3 times and I have the certificate for it, so I don't have to do the PCR test to return home anymore, which means, again, I'm not playing Russian roulette with the PCR test, worried that I'm going to have to cancel my flight and, not know when I can return to Japan. And it's because of this that, we've got a business meeting where my whole team is going to Singapore. And, there's one of the team members has a newborn baby and she can go for 3 days. But she can't go if she's not 100% sure that she can come back. So she's going to be attending remotely. And again, it's kind of arbitrary like that. It's kind of silly when Japan has the highest, COVID rates in the world. So yes, the good news is that they are waiving that requirement, which means that if you are vaccinated, provided, of course, you don't get desperately sick while you're in Singapore, you can travel as, return as planned. So that's some good news. Although that said, of course, some people calling out that in Japan, because they vaccinated young kids last, no kid in Japan apparently can be vaccinated 3 times right now. The maximum any kid under 12 can be vaccinated right now is twice. So for a lot of these families that are stranded in Hawaii because one of the kids got COVID, it's not going to help them out actually. Unless they create a rule that exempts for kids. The other thing is, of course, to remember is that the vaccination rate for adults in Japan is over 90%, but for under 12s, or even for under 18s, it's 30%. Parents are still afraid of giving their kids the vaccine, just worried about side effects and so on, which happen, right? I mean, even people I know have had rough rides. In fact, most people, it's normal to get at least a fever, and some people get bad side effects from it. So In spite of that, everyone's been vaccinated. It's a very high vaccination rate here. But I do know people at work who'd been vaccinated twice, but they thought, okay, and they didn't want to go through it again because they had such a rough time with the vaccinations. But if again, for the peace of mind that they can return to Japan and not have the risk of failing a PCR test, they are going to get a third shot before they travel. So I think it's good. It's small progress. There's no changing on the daily numbers of people allowed into Japan, and there's no change yet on easing the stupid requirements. They are going to change it that you don't have to have a tour guide anymore. You can just have a declared travel plan on a guided tour. So you still have to go and travel on a tour to fixed locations being tracked, but you don't have to be escorted by an escort anymore, or a tour guide anymore. You can just go and travel. So they're trying to ease that, but that's not really going to do it. You won't be free to go and see your friends and go to Akihabara and do all the things that people want to do. So, immigration still, at least the tourism is still not going to recover, but it's going to make for people traveling for any other reason into Japan, education, business, working here, people in Japan going out and returning, it's going to make things a little bit easier. So, yeah. Quickly going back, no comments aimed at me. If you do have a comment for me or a question for me or whatever, just say my name. You don't even have to put an @ mark, although you can @ mark, and I will respond. I'll do my best to respond. But I'm going to keep charging through. One of the other announcements that Max Headroom, Prime Minister, PR, no substance Prime Minister, made this week was he said, I'm not going to do a Max Headroom impersonation. I'm tempted to try, but I'm not going to do it. It's awesome computer stuttering and stuff like that. But no, he said more nuclear plants. Apparently they're going to be like water reactors, but everyone is pretty much like sick of going through being told that we're risking, having like unbearable heat and being told that please try not to use your air conditioners because the whole grid's going to collapse. Everyone's like, okay, please turn the nuclear, Fukushima wasn't so bad. Turn on all the nuclear reactors already. And my opinion on this as well, there's some debate online about, no, we can do it all with tidal power and wind power and so on. And that would be great. And I think ultimately that's how we want to do it. We want to use renewable energy sources and, just get a bunch of batteries to store up the intermittent and uneven power generation that renewable sources often generate. Store all that up and use that and be 100% no fossil fuels and no need for nuclear. But for now, for the amount of energy that Japan needs, and for all of the still challenges with all sorts of renewable, and I used to be a renewable energy policy consultant. No one's more pro renewable energy than me, but I also appreciate that as much as people say, oh, we should just be 100% renewable, let's just change it to that. It's not that easy. And while we're trying to figure that one out, nuclear power is not ideal, but it is preferable to coal or LNG or any of the other kind of fossil fuel or climate change enhancing forms of power generation, which right now is most of the way the power is generated in Japan. And if you believe that there is a climate crisis, which I do, and that it threatens civilization, we should, on an emergency basis, even with the intention, look, we should be closing down all these nuclear reactors as soon as we can. But at the moment, I consider that as someone who never left Japan during the whole Fukushima thing and stayed downwind 300 kilometers away or 500 kilometers away from Fukushima, I never left the country, and I went through it all and all of the stress of having a quadruple nuclear meltdown not far away. For all of that, I still consider that the risk to humanity of climate change is greater than that of nuclear accidents. And I'm willing to tolerate the risk of nuclear accidents on a path to renewable energy, but as being preferable to coal, and fossil fuel power plants, which have taken over from nuclear power plants in Japan. Again, they're always increasing renewable energy. They're always increasing solar and so on, and that's great. And the technology to install more and more is improving, and we should keep investing in that. I can't wait till we have like fusion and, that we can put generators, on the seabed that generate tidal power and stuff like that. They're trying to do that. But they keep breaking. All the test tidal sort of power systems on any scale break just because the ocean is just amazingly destructive. They can't make reliable systems, but I hope that they get there, and the government should be investing in all of that. But until we can fix that, burning coal is more dangerous than a nuclear power plant, at least in terms of human civilization and the planet. So I'm with Kishida on this. Obviously, it's not coming from Kishida; it's coming from Meti. The other thing is that then right now the other problem that Japan has is that all the current nuclear power plants are really 1950s technology. They're talking about using new, light water reactors, which produce very, very little waste and very, very relatively safe. So the hope is as well from that they'll be able to do this in a way that minimizes the risk aspects. And either way, I hope they can decommission them quickly and just replace them with cleaner, better sources. But I do think that this is something that we need to do urgently. So, to me, I'm in favor of that. Into the comments there, Aaron, why are they wanting to put this new nuclear plant? Well, first of all, I think there are still out of I forget the number. It's like 23 sites. There's more nuclear reactors than that, but there's like 23 sites in Japan, and nearly all of them are still shut down since 2011. And they're shut down because they are still implementing upgrades to ensure that in a Fukushima scale event, including literally a 90-foot tall tsunami and a magnitude 9 earthquake, that these reactors wouldn't have the same thing happen again. So they're putting in crazy safety, and they're failing the tests that are being put in to see if they'll be able to withstand that kind of a disaster. But they are putting in these safety measures. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to bring the current nuclear reactors that have been offline for more than 10 years now back online. And again, provided that they're doing that based on meeting safety requirements, how they're going to get the sign-off from local communities is a question, but that's the first part. The second part is that, there is a problem that Japan doesn't have enough generation capacity at the moment to meet its needs. And it needs huge chunks of generation capacity that at the moment it's covering with basically oil and gas and natural gas from Russia and places like that, and coal and so on, that are worsening climate change and making Japan fail its climate commitments. So they're going to install small, modern, light water nuclear reactors to be able to replace those kind of fossil fuels. So I think where are they wanting to put this in? I'm sorry, not why. I don't know. Apparently they're going to be small. I guess that's going to be a thing as well. I mean, any community is probably going to oppose having it in their neighborhood, but I don't know. In fact, another big problem that Japan has is where to put the nuclear waste. There was a big proposal to put it into Hokkaido, and the local community just wasn't having it. But Japan's got a big problem with storing waste, and any nuclear thing right now is a challenge. So I haven't heard the details of that other than just that they're planning to do it. Hey, Rainbow, good to see you. Oi, indeed. Traveling Gabriel, it wasn't just a meltdown. It was a release of radioactive exhaust. Vastly different situations. Well, it was, but it was a meltdown as well, right? I mean, there was an explosion. There was a release of nuclear material, and they found out later on that there was like a quadruple meltdown, I think. The internal cores had melted down, and that was partly behind the release of radioactive material. And look, and for all of that, I still think that we should be restarting the nuclear reactors. Mr. Ode, the risk of nuclear accidents is vastly overblown. Fusion is far off, but Japan should absolutely invest in nuclear power plants and export that stuff abroad. Well, I don't think it's an ideal solution, but I think it's better than anything that involves burning fossil fuels, personally. Where, not why. Sorry, that's right, Aaron. I'm sorry. I don't know where. Quint Rankid, can they put the waste on Battleship Island, that old coal mine place? That's a good movie idea. It'd be a good theme for a Bond movie or something like that. I don't know. For some reason, I mean, they're trying to pick deliberately very remote locations, like the one that they picked in Hokkaido, but that there's always going to be someone somewhere that owns it. Maybe they can put it on those islands that China wants, and then say, okay, China, you can have it back now. Who knows how they're going to do it. Theodore Sharp, I think that you're right about the pollution problem. One of the things I noticed is that some of the vehicles emit smog that's toxic. Yeah, indeed. I mean, and the fact is as well that if we all want to be having electric cars, as one of the solutions for this, or if we want to be generating hydrogen for cars, it's kind of pointless. I mean, it is actually still a slight improvement to use an electric car, even if the electric car is being charged with electricity from a coal power plant. It still is more efficient than using a gasoline car. But it's not that much of an improvement. You want to be having non-carbon fuel sources, energy sources for your energy. And I still think we should be investing like crazy in non-nuclear forms of fossil-free power. But at the same time, it's an emergency where we are failing at it at the moment. I think on that basis, we should be using all solutions and not be, we shouldn't continue using fossil fuels because as a preference over nuclear while we try to find better ways to be fully carbon neutral or carbon free. So that's just me anyway. But yeah, I'm actually not pro nuclear. I just think it's a lesser evil than what we're currently using. Hey, Mr. Cordy Chap, good to see you. Suga, it's kind of funny with all of the. I haven't been covering in a lot of detail the all the stuff going on with the Moonies at the moment. The cult for renamed the cult formerly known as the Moonies or Unification Church that's now calls itself the Global Institute for World Peace. Just trying to come up with something that sounds good. They have been sponsoring a lot of the LDP groups that have been really, really opposed to things like liberalization of LGBT, recognition of marriage rights for LGBT people. A lot of the social conservatives within the LDP have been, it now turns out, have been receiving tons of money from this crazy, extreme right-wing cult. And this includes opposition to allowing women to keep their names when they marry, to keep their surnames. So interesting that Suga, again, not very charismatic and not very, and not someone who I think of particularly as being extremely liberal per se. I don't see him as extremely conservative either, just generally sort of just a boring sort of a bureaucrat. But he's come out and said that, yeah, we shouldn't be allowing people to keep their original surnames when they get married. We should allow people to have the option to maintain it. And we shouldn't be delaying on this. And he's kind of capitalizing, I think, on the blowback against social conservatives in the LDP from the Unification Church scandal. And again, I mean, even look at the photo. How could this man ever have been prime minister? I think it's kind of, I've said before, I think it's wonderful that Japan actually has a political system where people with absolutely no communication skills or charisma whatsoever can become prime minister. But the thing is, he's actually reasonably okay as a policy maker, and again, this is a good idea, and it's good that he's plugging this, even though he's terrible at plugging it. He's got the right ideas with this. I also think he got an unfairly hard time on his handling of the pandemic in the beginning. I think Japan's results kind of vindicate the decisions that he took early on. So yeah, I called him Suga Knight. No, he's not Sugar Knight. He's a good guy. There are den of jackals at the LDP, like Kono, but I think of all the poorly rated, lowly rated Japanese PMs, he's one of the ones that I think is probably overly harshly evaluated. Not many more stories to do, actually. Okay, we're coming up on the big one. So very quickly, that recent survey of average wages at Japanese companies still pretty much hasn't changed the whole time I've been in Japan. Still 6 million, which on current exchange rates is like 45,000 US dollars. When I came to Japan from New Zealand in the late 1990s, this was a place where I would earn more money in a higher wage earning economy to pay off my student loan faster and get ahead a little bit. Maybe go back one day and buy a house, maybe just stay here and, be rich. And now the average income in New Zealand is actually way higher than Japan, and much, much higher in Australia, and much, much higher everywhere. Of course, the difference is that the cost of living in Japan hasn't changed either this whole time. So that 6 million yen, that 45,000 yen still buys you everything that bought you back in 1999. Whereas, of course, when I go back to Australia or New Zealand, the average wage is like $75,000 now. But, prices are ridiculous. I don't understand how people live. I certainly look now and I think, man, I couldn't afford to live there. So, but of course now prices are going up in Japan, but wages are not. So this is the perpetual problem here. But yeah, you can sort of see average. Oh, you know what? That actually is interesting. So that does show growth there. From 2012, it was 5.6 million. Okay, they've cut off the graph to make it look more dramatic than it is. So it's gone up a little bit. But yeah, dipped early on in the pandemic. But and look at this, the highest average salaries. And what's really, really interesting is that, sure, I get an M&A Capital Partners. I get an M&A company having quite a high salary for that company, but Keyence is one of the biggest electronics manufacturers in the world. And man, that's a crazy salary that they have for basically a maker. All the others are like trading and financial services and so on. So yeah, it's fascinating what's on there. It looks like you still get a reasonably good salary at Mitsui as well. I mean, those kind of numbers that you see on that chart are like CEO wages, even in listed companies in Japan. So yeah. Final story. I have to show this. Oh, you know what? There's two more stories. Okay, two more stories. The first one I'm going to go through is just very quickly. Starlink announced with T-Mobile the other day that they are actually about to launch a new generation of Starlink satellites. Right now, for Starlink, if you buy a big like satellite TV box and get a dish and point it up at the sky, you can get broadband internet like in most parts of the world right now, from satellites. And it's pretty cool because the satellites are in low Earth orbit. They're only like 500 kilometers away, as opposed to geosynchronous, where they're like thousands of kilometers away. Until now, all internet satellites were like thousands of kilometers away, fixed in position over Earth. That way. Because if you had them any closer to Earth, where they were rotating around the Earth, you would have to have thousands and thousands of satellites to be able to ensure coverage. The only way you can have constant coverage is having a satellite in a position that's fixed over Earth like a star. But the problem is they're so far away that the connectivity is terrible. But that's where you had internet satellite until now. You've always had geosynchronous. Of course, Starlink is a low Earth orbit LEO system, which has thousands of satellites, and they offer broadband connectivity. So of course, this is changing. It's going to mean that, again, in places without connectivity, like remote parts of America or Australia, or places like you think about ships or airliners or whatever, thinking about how we lose airliners or whatever. Places like Africa, developing countries, this is a way to get connectivity where it doesn't currently go. However, what T-Mobile and Starlink just announced is that they're actually going to be putting up, with their next generation of satellites, an additional antenna, which will basically just be like a normal cell station. And again, this will be on thousands of satellites flying around the world, where you won't even need a terminal or a satellite dish to connect. It'll just connect straight to your current phone, and you won't be able to do it won't be broadband. It won't even have voice or video, but you will be able to send text messages. So basically, if you go hiking in an area where there's no connectivity, your current normal phone will be able to connect in almost anywhere in the world, basically, and you'll be able to send a text message and say where you are and get help. Basically, this will enable, finally, it's kind of crazy in this day and age that there are parts of the world where you can be where you can still be lost, but this will eliminate that, and it's super cool. And the fact that this is the first, that there are like three, there's going to be OneWeb and Kuiper. There's going to be some other companies coming out offering the same sort of things in the coming years. Super just cool technology, and it's cool that this is coming around. The final thing, appropriation, man. Okay, we're coming up on time, but this is the main thing I wanted to talk about. A guy who seems like actually not necessarily a bad guy, but got kind of dragged. Oh, I had it fixed on the Twitter page and then I lost it. Okay. Oh, here it is. Oh, wow. The original tweet's also gone now. I actually checked this before and the tweet was still there. Okay, so I saw this tweet from Sachiko Ishikawa on my Twitter feeds, and basically there was a guy who, apparently from his profile was like a VC sort of tech investor, who apparently had spent some time in Japan and wanted to share his philosophical sort of enlightening thoughts for the day, saying, I spent some time in Japan and I learned. Here are some wonderful things I learned from the Japanese language and Japanese culture that I want to share, with you all. And basically gave a kind of one of those, here is a here's a keyboard. It's a unique Japanese device with keys and presses and whatever. And basically just sort of doing the old. It was characterized here by Sachiko as being sort of mystical orientalist kind of mystical terms in Japan, like denkyu or whatever, light bulb, and dressing them up with like air flutes as being some kind of crazy orientalist cool thing. And of course a lot of people like to do this. A lot of people like to write articles about how I think so. It looks like Shogunai was on the list, and how Shogunai means going with the flow and giving into the inevitability of the universe. And it's like, dude, it's just a normal word. Everyone says it is what it is. What can you do? Can't be helped. These are not unique Japanese concepts. Cut it out already. And first of all, Sachiko, who herself expresses sometimes extreme opinions, and she said, I am begging white people to stop this Orientalist BS trend of, taking just regular human trends in Japanese and dressing them up as Orientalist. To which I responded that, Sachiko, you realize I take a comment like, as a white person, I take that as a dare, and I then created my own list, which I'm very proud of. Where, yes, I started talking about things that are unique expressions that help enrich all our lives. First of all, tatemai and honne. You use this when you break wind in an elevator and everyone looks at you. Your tatemai is when you tell everyone it wasn't me, but your honne is when you say, okay, yeah, it was me. And I go on, I do a top 10 list, realizing that by the time I got to the third one, that these weren't very funny to start with, and I'd already committed to a top 10 list. And it was already going downhill, and I felt like I boxed myself into a corner. But in spite of that, I did actually come up. In fact, since I just had Twitter open, let's see if I can find my list, since I'm kind of proud of it. Yes, as a white person, you have to understand that I take a request like this as a dare. Where am I at? It's okay, I got it here. So 1, tatemai honne. So that's kind of one that gets pulled up a lot for these Orientalist discussions. 2, densha. It's a big metal thing, carries people, and goes around on rails. You may have heard of it, densha. I never thought this was a concept able to fundamentally improve someone's personality until I saw the Twitter feed of Rahm Emanuel, who everyone said is like the devil incarnate, but he just seems like a nice man who likes trains now, so it seems to have mellowed him out. Shiki, which means the 4 seasons, of course. Shiki, a term used by Japanese to describe the 72 micro-seasons that Japan has, but deliberately ignoring the 68 that just totally suck. Wasureru. I came up with these as I was going along. Wasureru. Don't remember what it means, but it's very important, so you should probably remember it. Ice cream. The Japanese concept of how life can be cold and delicious and fleeting. And I actually didn't realize until later. Some people said, "Oh, I've seen movies like that," and that wasn't an intentional double entendre. Although I realize now it came out like that. Otsukare-sama desu. That's what you say at the end of work each day. And it means, I don't know why you are here or why I am here, what the point of all of this is anymore. And oh my God, my life is a disaster. I need to go home and rethink all of my life choices. Everyone says it at the end of work every day. Yabai. This is the Japanese philosophical concept representing the duality of how both good and bad are two sides of the same coin, as well as the thin edge of the coin. And coins can pretty much be used for everything and are responsible for reducing everyone's vocabulary. Because, of course, yabai just gets used for everything. So, kokai, the indescribable feeling you get when you start a top 10 list on Twitter as a flippant joke without any plan, and realizing that each number is getting less funny, and then saying something that since the first ones weren't even that funny to start with. So, yes, anyway, I came up with my own list. On all of this, and someone afterwards was saying, "Hey, look, stop being mean to the guy. The guy just learned some stuff in Japan, and he's all just excited, and stop bullying him." To which I also responded, "Hey, I don't think this is so much bullying as the ancient Japanese practice of ijime," which was mean, but I couldn't help myself. Twitter is so much fun. So, but the thing about all of this is, I'm actually with the tech bro VC guy who did this, and I do think it was a bit, even though I also deliberately made a lot of fun of him. It was in good sport. The fact that people are saying, "Hey, please stop fetishizing and exoticizing, our culture," or whatever. I don't like it when people play cultural gatekeeper. I am the poster child of people. Whenever you're calling out anything about identity politics, I'm basically the enemy in all discussions. Who's not supposed to appropriate, who's not supposed to borrow anything from any culture that's not white or whatever. But look, I've lived in Japan now for 10 years longer than I've lived in New Zealand. More than half of my life now I've spent in Japan. It's like my whole life is appropriating. And the idea that someone in America, based on American identity politics, is offended by seeing someone in Japan, seeing a Caucasian person in Japan wearing a kimono, saying that's appropriating my Asian culture. When, the concept of Asian culture doesn't exist in Japan. Because, it's like dozens of countries. It's ridiculous to say that Japan is the same culture as Laos. It is that way in America, but this is the whole point. It's completely situational. And the idea that, and you don't know anything about the person wearing the dress. They could live in Japan. They could be like me. They could be a Japanese citizen, but you're making a judgment based on their appearance that, they're appropriating your culture, and you yourself might have no ties to Japan. But still identify and feel ownership of that culture, and like you're entitled to be a gatekeeper of it because you in America are classified as an Asian person. And again, a lot of people I think get a little bit too sensitive at the idea. Appropriation, look, here's the fact. When you're learning Japanese, when you're speaking Japanese, my brain operates differently in Japanese than it does in English. And actually being in Japan for a long time, I don't doubt has changed my personality, has rewired my brain, and it's changed my English. And that's a good thing. And when this is happening to people, when people start to realize that people here do think differently, they behave differently, the culture is different, but the language is also so different, it actually does require you to rewire your brain a little bit. And when you're experiencing this, it's kind of cool, and again, I understand how people get excited and they start saying, earphone, let me tell you the ancient Japanese art of earphone, because everything starts to feel sort of weird and new through a new lens. But my view is, don't be a gatekeeper. Don't say, hey, white person, stop enjoying that you learned the word for McDonald's. Let them enjoy it. Seriously, the world if the world needs more appropriation. The world would be a better place if we all just openly exchanged. There's inappropriate appropriation, which is when you mock cultures, which again, coming from a background of basically, evil incarnate of mocking culture. I mean, it's what the British Empire conquered a third of the world and just, mocked it and abused it, and now doesn't understand why they all resent, why everyone was so upset. For all of the problems that come from, again, of people who intentionally denigrate and mock cultures in the course of appropriating them, that's fine. But people who are doing it genuinely from a position of trying to appreciate and trying to learn, even if they're doing it badly, especially when the people here in Japan appreciate people trying to learn and appropriate and take on features of their culture. I think it's a good thing that we can learn. Just as I love to see Japanese culture being adopted in different parts of America, and the fact that these musicians have to apologize for dressing up like Harajuku girls or something like that because people start getting offended in America by that. That's a great thing. It's just the same as, honestly, it's just the same as Japanese during Meiji period appropriating wearing, Western clothing, wearing trousers. What's wrong? Again, I think these are things that build bridges and bring us together. I'm hoping as a retiree that I'll be appropriating African culture from Africa, not of African American culture, but actual like Eswatini culture. I'm hoping that there'll be Rwandan cultural philosophers and historical figures that I'll be inspired by. I think that's a good thing. I've spent my whole life appropriating Japanese culture, and I totally understand where someone's at when they're writing these top 10 lists of things, which, yeah, you can poke fun of them, and I did. I started doing, inspirational, stories about what the meaning of the word for train is. But the funny thing is that, yeah, when you're learning Japanese, learning the word for train in Japanese is kind of magical, just as it is if you learn it in French or if you learn it in, Hindi or whatever. And I think it's good to let people feel that and, to share the experience of getting a new perspective. It's something that we need more. And I really think that these it's one aspect of woke culture that as much as I consider myself socially liberal and I aspire to be woke and aware and I try to be considerate of other people, I do think when people invoke wokeness as a way of, frankly, gatekeeping to sort of promote keeping barriers between people and barriers between understanding and appreciation is the wrong thing. So I actually think that Tech Bro, inspired by Shogunai, power to you. Keep doing it. I think the ancient practice of ijime was not called for. That said, I mean, it is a lot of fun to see when it gets called out. And I had fun with it myself. But I would say no one should ever feel discouraged from wanting to learn or appreciate another culture out of fear of being told that they're appropriating it. It's a sad by effect of the cultural identity wars that are going on that I really hope there's a correction on at some point, but we'll see. Anyway, that's my personal view. Theodore Sharp, that's why people don't do anything anymore. Amen. I mean, that's my fear. That's my fear. The idea that, people like they're if you go to Kyoto, you can go and they will show you the whole kimono thing, wearing a kimono. And if you've been in Japan, you understand that kimono, like done properly, is an hour-long process. Every single clothing item, every single the way that things are tied, every way that the clothes are folded is a ceremony. It has a meaning, and they explain it to you for an hour, putting on a kimono. So, the idea that someone would come to Kyoto, for example, and go through learning the whole kimono wearing process and would do that and then would take a photo and post it onto social media, and then some fifth generation, Korean, Mongolian American says, "You're stealing my Asian culture as a white person, please stop." Screw you and screw your mother. Seriously, like, you've got no. And the thing is, maybe that's something in America people can say. It varies from place to place. But the idea that that might cause a whole bunch of other people coming to Japan thinking, oh, I shouldn't take that kimono course in Kyoto because it might be appropriation, the whole world loses. The whole world loses. And for the sake of just making some idiots, frankly, gatekeepers feel like they did something good when they did something terrible. There are bad forms of appropriation that's it's fair to call out on, but I don't think discouraging people from learning is a bad thing. So anyway, screw you and screw your mother. That's how I'm going to end the show this week. Hope you all have a good week. Hope that you all stay safe. Thank you, Aaron, for approving that before I did. Everybody, have a good week. Stay safe from the Rona. Hope to see you over in Japan sometime soon. Looking forward to traveling myself. I'll let you know what my travel schedule is. I might have to do a show from New Zealand or Singapore or something. But keep you posted. Follow me on Twitter. Remember to like if you liked. I do appreciate that like. I see there are 14 likes there at the moment. And I'll see you all next week, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Boom. Peace.